Hello, Bio30, and welcome to our introduction to the pituitary gland and the endocrine system. We are going to start in our notes just briefly talking about what is the endocrine system and what are hormones. So today what you're learning is about the endocrine system and how it maintains homeostasis, and you're learning what a hormone is and the different structures in the body that releases them. Today the goal is to define the endocrine system, identify the differences between a steroid and a protein hormone, as well as define tropic versus non-tropic, and then look at feedback loops. In the next video, we're going to look at identifying the glands and labeling a diagram. Where we're going to start first is we're going to start with what is the endocrine system. So the endocrine system is a system in which we secrete messengers called hormones. These messengers go directly into our bloodstream, which is very important, and they're transported throughout the body. Now, hormones themselves are proteins, not all, but some are proteins, and we will be learning about how we build proteins later in this chapter. But right now, what you need to understand is that when a hormone is set in motion, that's kind of what the word means, to be set in motion and excite, they're going to target a cell that then these cells are going to have a specific outcome or response to do. So how we draw what hormones do is here's my endocrine gland, which is going to secrete my hormone, and here's my target tissue, which is going to receive that hormone. When an endocrine gland is stimulated, it's going to release whatever hormone that specifically comes from that gland. That hormone then is going to find its target tissue and find its binding site. Whether it's on the surface or inside the cell, it is going to bind to that target. Now you'll notice that my target cells and my hormones have roughly the same shapes. This end tip here will fit within this binding site here. So hormones are carried through the blood and they will go and affect specific cells, okay? We call the spot where the hormone binds, we call that a receptor site. And it's very much like how your keys to your car or to your house would work. It's very much designed to be a lock and key mechanism, meaning only one key can open the lock. If a hormone does not match the reactor, then what ends up happening is there's no reaction. And all the cells have receptor sites that do this for target tissue. So in your notes, you're going to draw this picture and then just kind of quickly, briefly fill out the blanks below. So fill out this picture in the space given, and then fill in the blanks here. So let's talk about hormones in general. There are two types. There's ones that are called steroids and ones that are called proteins. And every hormone produced in the body is unique, okay? They are different in chemical composition, structures, and actions. We're going to look at the two different types of hormones, protein and lipid-based. Lipid-based is made out of fats. Protein is amino acids. So we have a chart that we're going to look at, and it's going to compare the two. So steroid hormones are considered our slow release and protein hormones are considered our fast release. The composition of our steroidal hormones are made out of lipids, where our protein hormones are made out of amino acids. If we are looking at the solubility within the cell or around the cell, a lipid or a steroid hormone is going to be scared of water. Okay, we know that water and oil don't work together. That's a lipid. So think of that when you're thinking steroid hormones. So rather than being water soluble, they're only soluble around other lipids. Where protein hormones don't have an issue with water. They don't mind being around water. So we say they're water soluble. That changes how they actually bind. If you have a steroid-based hormone, they have to go inside the cell to bind because cells are surrounded by water. So they don't want to be around water, so they try to move their way inside the cell to bind with receptors found there. Proteins don't mind water, so they end up binding with receptors outside the cell. So you'll have them around the outside because the water doesn't faze them. A lot of time we get our steroidal hormones from our adrenal glands and our gonads, whereas our protein hormones typically come from our pituitary, our thyroid, and our pancreas. And we will really be diving into all of these and looking at them and defining them. Things that can be considered steroidal hormones are testosterone and estrogen, cortisol and aldosterone. And we're going to focus on all of those at one point throughout this chapter. And the ones that are more protein-based are things like HGH, insulin, and thyroxine. Again, we are also going to look at all of those. So if you're like, I don't know what some of these mean, that's okay. We're eventually going to learn about them. Another key thing to understand about hormones is that there is a difference between a tropic hormone and a non-tropic hormone. This is a term-based idea, so you need to know this definition, so we're going to define this. A tropic hormone is a hormone that targets another endocrine gland. So what I mean is it leaves its home and it goes to another gland and targets that gland. Where a nontropic hormone leaves its gland and then goes to body tissue. So an example to kind of help you understand is our thyroid is a gland. When our thyroid is activated, it is activated by TSH, the thyroid stimulating hormone. When our thyroid is activated, we release something called thyroxine. Okay, so the TSH targets a gland to release another hormone. That is the point of a tropic hormone. Where something like HGH or oxytocin, once it's released, it goes straight to our body and deals with our cells. So HGH helps with growth. Oxytocin will go to women's mammary glands and help deal with milk production. There's many different uses for these hormones, but that is the difference. One targets a gland that releases another hormone, and the other targets the body tissues. We are going to be looking at feedback loops in class, but just know that there are two types of feedback loops, a negative feedback loop and a positive feedback loop. We will fill in these particular notes in class together. Just to give you an idea, though, of what a feedback loop can look like, you can see on the left side here, we have kind of just the generalization of how feedback works. There's a stimulus, then there's a variable that has to be monitored. There's a sensor that has to go and deal with the control, and that control changes what's happening and goes back to the variable to check on the variable. So to put that into context, if you think about our body temperature can change and fluctuate. Now, if our body temperature is what we're monitoring, the senses that deal that are the nerve cells in our skin and brain. So our skin can feel hot or our skin can feel cold. Now, if we feel too hot or we feel too cold, our control center within our brain will deal with that and either warm us up or try and cool us down. So it'll either make us shiver to heat us up, or it'll make us sweat to cool us down. So that's how you would deal with the effector. So if you're too hot, for example, your body temperature is exceeding where it's supposed to be, the effector is going to be your sweat glands that releases sweat. As sweat glands release sweat, it's going to be monitored. Your body temperature is going to be constantly monitored, and we're going to continue this feedback loop until our body temperature is back to where it's supposed to be. So this is just an example of a feedback loop, and we're going to be working only with feedback loops throughout this entire chapter. So today, again, we learned about what is the endocrine system and how does it maintain homeostasis. That's through feedback loops. And we talked a little bit about hormones. So your goal is to be able to tell me what is the endocrine system. Can you tell me the difference between steroid and protein hormones and where they bind? Can you define tropic and non-tropic? And can you make a feedback loop? So that's it. And if you have any questions, let me know.